She didn't look like a soldier. Not to the rest of them. Not at first. Private First Class Elena Ramirez was quiet, polite, and built like someone who belonged behind a desk, not behind a rifle. She had joined late, at 29. Most of her team had already served multiple tours by then. They called her the Mule. Not as an insult. That was just her role. Carry extra ammo. Spare batteries. Water. Backup optics. A second rifle she'd never be allowed to fire. She knew the expectations. Keep your head down. Do the job. Don't get in the way. They didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. What they didn't know was that Elena came from 3 generations of Army Scouts. Her grandfather had carried a bolt-action rifle through Korea. Her mother had taught marksmanship at Fort Benning. By the time Elena was 15, she could group 5 shots inside a bottle cap from 400 meters. But she never talked about that. She didn't want special treatment. She wanted to earn her place, even if that meant starting from the bottom. The first time she carried gear for Chief Jacobs, he barely looked at her. "Stick close. Don't speak unless I speak to you," he said, slinging his rifle over one shoulder and walking off into the Afghan dust. Jacobs was a Navy SEAL, older, scarred, cold-eyed. He didn't trust easily, especially not with someone new. They were heading out on a recon mission near a narrow ridgeline southwest of Sanjin, a suspected weapons drop zone. Quiet assignment. Observe and report. Elena walked 2 steps behind Jacobs the whole way. Watched him scan the horizon. Watched how he breathed, how he moved, how he tracked light, wind, and distance with nothing but instinct. He never asked if she was watching. She never asked if he cared. But she remembered everything. The valley was dry and dead silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. They reached the nest, an overlook made of broken stone and camouflage netting, and dug in. Jacobs unwrapped his rifle. Customized M2010. Extended barrel. Suppressed. Already ranged for the terrain. Elena laid out the gear without a word. Extra mags on his left. Wind meter on the right. Spotting scope calibrated and ready. She had done it enough times that it felt like choreography, not military routine. Muscle memory. Jacobs adjusted the rifle. Then, for the first time, he spoke. "You ever use one of these?" Elena looked at him. Nodded once. "Ever take a shot for real?" "No," she said. "Just paper." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he looked back through the scope. "That's where everyone starts," he muttered. The sun was dropping fast. Shadows stretched long across the hills. The rest of the units spread out below, scanning, waiting. Nothing moved. No smoke. No chatter. No drone coverage. Just silence. Jacob stayed locked behind the scope. Elena scanned the ridgeline to the east. A gut feeling told her something was wrong. Then, finally, Jacob said something she hadn't heard all day. "Something's off." He sat up slightly, adjusted the scope again, slid the bolt back, and checked the chamber. "Get ready to move." Elena felt the hairs on her arms rise. She hadn't heard anything. But Jacobs had that tone, the one soldiers use when they know, not when they think. Seconds later, a distant sound cracked through the still air. Not thunder, not echo. A rifle shot. And Chief Jacobs dropped like a stone. She didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She moved. Elena dropped beside Jacobs, hand searching for the wound. Blood was spreading fast across his side. Entry wound low on the ribs. No exit. He was alive, conscious, breathing through clenched teeth. He locked eyes with her. Not in panic. In clarity. "The ridge," he said, barely audible. "East. Suppress shot. High angle." Elena nodded once. She looked up. The team was taking cover below. No return fire. They hadn't seen the shooter. But whoever was out there had eyes on them. And the next shot wouldn't be a warning. She dragged Jacobs behind the stone cover, slipping the sniper rifle with her. He grunted from the pain, but said nothing more. The rifle lay in the dirt between them, still warm. She looked at it, then at him. Jacob stared back. Then, with one slow motion, he reached down and slid the rifle toward her. That was all the permission she needed. Elena had trained, quietly, in her own time, after hours, with borrowed rifles and makeshift ranges. No one had asked her to. No one had to. She'd memorized ballistics tables, scope calibrations, wind adjustment formulas. She'd watched Jacobs every time he fired a shot. Not because she had to, but because she could not. Now it mattered. She checked the rifle's chamber. 1 in. 4 in the mag. She loaded a fresh magazine from Jacob's vest, clicked it into place, and slid forward to the edge of the nest. Her breath slowed. The scope swept across the ridgeline. Nothing moved. But she saw it. A flicker of glass. A sliver of light off a lens. Tucked behind a rock outcrop. Exactly where Jacobs had said. Distance, about 600 meters. Crosswind, left to right. Minor elevation. She adjusted the turret. 1 click. 2 clicks. She exhaled slowly. Finger on the trigger. Just like she'd done 100 times. But this time, it wasn't paper. She squeezed. The rifle kicked gently into her shoulder. In the scope, the glint disappeared. A black figure slumped forward and slid down the rock face. 1 shot. Clean. She pulled back slightly. No celebration. No breath of relief. She chambered the next round. Because it wasn't over. More movement. North Ridge. Someone said through the radio. 2, maybe 3. Trying to flank us. Elena stayed down. Scoped left. Adjusted. Picked up a silhouette. Then 2 more, spaced out, moving fast. No one on the team had the angle. They were exposed. If those fighters got past the ridge, they'd be on top of them in minutes. Elena exhaled again. Wind still steady. Heartbeat slowing now, not racing. She took the shot. The lead figure dropped. The others scattered, but she tracked the second and fired again. It hit. The last one disappeared into the rocks. The radio went quiet. Then a new voice came through. Ramirez, was that you? She didn't answer. Jacobs was slipping in and out of consciousness. She pulled a bandage tight around his torso and pressed down. He gritted his teeth, but nodded. She looked out at the ridgeline again. Everything was still. Her hands weren't shaking. Her mind wasn't racing. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was focused. 1 rifle. 1 position. 1 mission. And for now, she was the only one who could do it. The radio buzzed again. Command, this is Alpha 2. Sniper is down. Ramirez has assumed position. 2 enemy Kia. Requesting evac and overwatch. No response. Just static. The squad was spread out below the ridge, pinned behind rocks and dried brush. They had no elevation, no angle, and no way to move unless someone controlled the high ground. Right now, that someone was Elena. She stayed low, keeping her scope trained on the ridgeline. Her world had narrowed. It wasn't about fear anymore. It wasn't even about bravery. It was about duty. She counted the minutes. 6 since the first shot. Still no drone coverage. Still no evac. Just the silence of dust and distance. Through the lens, she spotted movement again. Barely visible, low crawling near the edge of the rocks. Different angle. Smarter this time. Testing her vision. She adjusted her elevation and held her breath. Not yet. Not when he was moving. Wait for the stillness. That's what Jacobs had taught her. The crawler reached a dip in the ridge and paused. She squeezed the trigger. The man never got up. She shifted positions immediately. No sniper fires twice from the same spot. Another lesson drilled into her by hours of observation and Jacob's gruff, casual advice. Now those lessons were the difference between life and death. Her earpiece crackled again. Elena, came a voice. It was Sergeant Brooks, the team lead. You holding? She responded calmly. 3 targets down. Ridge is quiet for now. Still no air support. There was a pause. We're trying to push west. You've got the only angle. I know, she said. Below her, the squad moved carefully. Short bursts. Low sprints. They trusted she'd see threats before they did. Another movement. Farther out. This one wasn't crawling. Elena adjusted and focused. 2 fighters. One had a radio. The other carried a scoped rifle slung over his shoulder. They were scanning the ridge. They were looking for her. She tightened her grip. Let her breathing settle. Watched the wind kick light bursts of sand into the air. The scope flickered for just a second as the sun hit the terrain from a new angle. One breath. She fired. The spotter dropped. The shooter spun in confusion. Too late. She'd already recentered the scope. The second shot hit before he had time to lift his weapon. More silence. More waiting. She leaned back for a moment. Muscles tense. Eyes dry. Jacobs groaned beside her. He was pale. Weak. Bleeding had slowed, but it was clear he needed more than field treatment. She checked the tourniquet again. Still tight. Still working, for now. 10 minutes had passed. Then finally, the radio clicked. This is Ghostbird 1. We're inbound. 2 mics out. Mark your LZ with smoke. Elena grabbed the flare from Jacob's pack and launched it. Red smoke curled into the sky. Sergeant Brooks confirmed it. Eyes on. We're moving to the LZ. But Elena stayed where she was. Still watching. Still covering. She wouldn't leave until every last team member was off that ridge. Below her, she saw the first 2 soldiers break cover and run. Then a third. A fourth. No one fired at them. No muzzle flashes. No movement. Whoever had been watching was gone, or dead. As the Black Hawk touched down, Brooks came on the comms again. Ramirez. That was some fine work. She didn't answer. She was already breaking down the rifle, collecting the spent brass, securing the optics. The job wasn't done until the gear was clean. She'd learned that too. The rotor washed it hard as the Black Hawk lifted off. Elena sat at the edge of the open ramp, her boots hanging just above the valley floor. Jacobs lay strapped to a stretcher beside her, eyes closed but still breathing. The medic had given him something for the pain. For now, that was all anyone could do. No one spoke during the flight back. Brooks sat across from her, helmet off, eyes fixed on her. He didn't look confused. He looked curious. Like he was trying to solve a problem that didn't fit the math. When they landed at the forward operating base, medics rushed Jacobs away. Elena didn't follow. She slung the sniper rifle across her back and walked in the opposite direction, toward the weapons bay. She needed to clean the rifle. That's what Jacobs would have done. That's what she'd do now. She didn't make it past the tarmac. Ramirez, Brooks called behind her. She turned. He walked up slowly, pulled off his gloves, and looked her dead in the eyes. You didn't hesitate. Elena didn't answer. You're not just some support mule, are you? Still no answer. Brooks exhaled, then nodded. Come to briefing. CO's gonna want to hear it straight. Inside the ops tent, the air was thick with tension. Maps, photos, tactical readouts. The commanding officer stood at the table, arms crossed. A couple of intel guys sat off to the side, typing notes. Everyone turned when Elena stepped in. Brooks gave the report. Clean. Professional. No fluff. Just facts. Sniper down. Ramirez assumed position. Confirmed kills. Provided overwatch. Secured safe exfil. When he finished, the CO turned to her. That rifle. You ever fire one of those before today? Yes, sir. Qual scores. Perfect scores at every range. Never missed a test. Never missed a target. The room went still. Why aren't you assigned to recon or designated marksman duty? She met his eyes. Because I wasn't asked. The CO raised an eyebrow. He didn't smile. Just nodded once. You are now. He turned to the intel officers. She's on the next Overwatch rotation. Move her file. It was that simple. But not everyone was thrilled. Later that night, in the barracks, a few glances were colder than usual. Not angry, just quiet. Men who'd trained for years, who'd waited for their shot, who hadn't taken it. She didn't blame them. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of generators outside, replaying every shot, every sound, every breath. The fear hadn't caught up to her yet, but it would. It always did. She knew that from the stories her mother told. The adrenaline fades. The silence creeps in. Then the questions start. But tonight, she felt only one thing: readiness. She wasn't proud. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't even tired. She was ready to do it again. And she knew deep down, this wasn't the last time they'd call her name when it mattered. 2 weeks later, her name was on the roster. No ceremony. No announcement. Just a line of text on the assignment board outside the operations tent. Ramirez, Overwatch, South Ridge, Operation Clayline. She didn't react. Didn't smile. Didn't flinch. The other soldiers noticed. A few nodded respectfully. 1 or 2 avoided her gaze. She understood. What happened with Jacobs had changed something. Not just in her, but in them. She wasn't one of the extras anymore. She was part of the line. The mission was a high-risk intel extraction. A joint unit had identified a meeting site used by arms traffickers operating out of Helmand. The plan was to intercept a courier, recover data, and get out before the area swarmed. Elena's role was clear. Set up early. Establish eyes on the valley. Provide cover if things went wrong. She arrived at the Overwatch position 3 hours before the op kicked off. The climb was brutal. The heat worse. But she didn't complain. She moved like someone who belonged there. Her spotter, Corporal Donnelly, had been reassigned to her after the last mission. A quiet man. Former Marine. Didn't talk much. Didn't ask dumb questions. She liked that. They set up beneath the jagged rocks of the South Ridge, camouflaged by netting and elevation. From her scope, Elena could see everything. Dirt road, dried stream bed, a crumbling house with a rusted roof. That was the meeting point. She calibrated wind, checked distances, adjusted for elevation. Everything locked in. The team below moved into position slowly, taking cover behind broken walls and vegetation. She tracked them each in her scope, watching for movement beyond their line of sight. For the first hour, nothing happened. Just silence, wind, and tension. Then 2 dirt bikes appeared from the east. 2 men. One with a satchel over his back. They stopped outside the building. One went in. The other waited outside, scanning the hills. Donnelly leaned over, whispering. "Got eyes on the courier?" "Affirmative," she said. "Targets inside." Second man, security. The team below moved into place. They were close now, 30 seconds from breaching. Then something changed. Another vehicle. Not on the road. Coming from the south. A black SUV kicking up dust, not fast, but wrong. Too quiet for this part of the country. Not local. Not normal. She zoomed in. 3 men inside. Gear that didn't match the others. No insignias. Heavy weapons. She clicked on the radio. "Alpha Team, be advised. Unidentified vehicle inbound from the south. 3 armed males. Heavily equipped. Approaching fast." Command responded immediately. "Ramirez, confirm. Can you disable the vehicle?" She steadied her breath. "Not from this angle. Obstructed by ridge shadow." Donnelly tapped her shoulder. "I've got a partial line on the driver. If he leans forward." They waited. The vehicle crested a low rise, and for a second, the driver leaned into the wheel, just enough. She didn't hesitate. 1 shot. The windshield cracked. The SUV jerked sideways, hit a rock, and flipped once before crashing into the dust. No explosion. No fire. Just silence again. Below, the team kicked into motion. Breach. Flashbang. Screams. Orders shouted in 2 languages. Through her scope, Elena watched the chaos unfold, ready to fire again if needed. The courier was dragged out, cuffed, and hooded. The satchel recovered. Extraction confirmed. All units pulling back. Elena scanned the ridge one last time. No threats. No movement. Donnelly leaned over. "Still think you don't belong up here?" She didn't answer. She just cleaned the bolt, reset the scope, and watched the dust settle across the valley. Because in her world, silence wasn't peace. It was just the space between missions. The sun was barely up when Elena woke. The desert morning was sharp, cold, and unforgiving, just like the job. She'd barely slept, not because of pain or worry, but because her mind wouldn't stop racing. Her fingers itched to feel the cold steel of her rifle, to settle into the nest, and focus her sight on a distant point. Today wasn't just another mission. It was a test. The command had decided to send her on a solo overwatch. No spotter. No backup. Just her a radio, and the rifle she had come to trust more than most people. It was meant to push her limits, to prove she was ready. Elena didn't hesitate. She climbed the steep ridge alone, every step crunching on loose rocks. Her pack was heavy, but her shoulders carried it like armor. By the time she reached the position, sweat had already dampened her shirt. She moved quickly, setting up the sniper rifle with practiced precision, calibrated the scope, checked the wind meter, marked the coordinates on her tablet. She looked through the lens. The valley stretched out below her, vast and silent. For hours she watched. Nothing. No movement. Just the slow dance of shadows and sunlight across the hills. Her radio buzzed. "Ramirez, do you copy?" It was command. Loud and clear. "Enemy activity spotted near the east ridge. Possible weapons transfer. Be advised." She adjusted her scope and focused. Through the lens, she saw a group of figures moving cautiously through the rocky outcrop. They carried crates. Heavy crates. She zoomed in. The crates were sealed, marked with foreign symbols. Could be weapons. Could be explosives. Elena's heart sped up. This was exactly what they had trained for. But alone, she had to rely on her instincts more than ever. She called in coordinates and description. Command, targets confirmed. Suspected weapons transfer. Requesting extraction team and air support. Static. Then a cold voice. "Copy that, Ramirez. Backup en route. Hold position." She settled back behind the rifle. Her eyes never left the targets. The men worked quickly, unloading crates and stacking them near a rusted truck. Suddenly, movement from behind a boulder caught her attention. A figure slipped out, a scout, possibly enemy. He was heading straight toward her position. Elena's breath caught. Alone, she had no margin for error. She slowly moved the rifle, tracking the scout's approach. The man froze halfway up the ridge, scanning. Elena held her breath, finger poised. Then the scout reached into his pocket, pulled out a small device. A radio. He was calling for reinforcements. She had seconds. The shot was clean. The scout dropped silently into the dust. Immediately, her radio crackled. "Ramirez, shots fired. Confirm status." She whispered, "Scout down." No other movement. Targets still active. Minutes later, dust clouds stirred below as armored vehicles appeared, followed by the drone overhead. Elena watched as her team moved in, surrounding the weapons cache. Extraction was smooth. No casualties. Back at base, the debriefing was quiet but intense. Command praised her marksmanship, decision-making, and composure. But Elena knew this was just the beginning. She had stepped out of the shadow of being the mule. Now she was a sniper, a protector, a guardian of the ridge. And the war wasn't over. Elena woke to the hum of the base stirring to life. The sun was barely aglow over the horizon, but the desert heat was already seeping into her skin. She ran her fingers over the worn stock of her rifle, a quiet reminder of how far she had come. It had been months since she stepped into the sniper role, months of relentless missions and constant vigilance. She had earned respect, but respect came with expectations. I watched her now, not just as the ammo mule, but as a protector, a lifeline. Today's mission was different. Intelligence had confirmed a high-value target moving through a mountain pass several clicks north. The team needed overwatch cover for the assault team's approach. Elena was the sniper assigned. She packed carefully, double-checking every piece of gear. Every detail mattered. As she climbed into position, the silence was thick, broken only by the crunch of gravel underfoot. The elevation was steep, the air thin. Her breath was steady, her heartbeat a slow drum. At the top, she set up quickly. From her vantage point, the valley stretched wide, a patchwork of rocky outcrops and dusty trails. She swept the area with her scope, looking for any sign of movement. Her radio crackled. Alpha Team moving in. ETA 5 minutes. She nodded to herself. 5 minutes could be the difference between success and disaster. Time slowed as she scanned the terrain. The sun crept higher, shadows shifting. Then, faint figures appeared at the edge of her sight. The target was moving with 2 guards, cautious but determined. Elena adjusted the scope, calculating distance, wind, and elevation. She thought back to everything Jacobs had taught her. The discipline, the patience, the focus. This wasn't about shooting quickly, it was about shooting right. She held her breath. A sudden rustle caught her attention to the left. Movement. Not part of the team. Her pulse quickened. Hostiles closing in. Through the scope, she spotted 3 fighters creeping through the brush, flanking toward her position. She radioed urgently. Hostiles moving west flank. 3 targets closing fast. Copy that, came the response. Prepare to engage. Elena's finger rested lightly on the trigger. She tracked the closest enemy, waiting for the perfect moment. The figure slowed, scanning the ridge. The first shot cracked sharply. The lead fighter dropped instantly, eyes wide with shock. The other 2 scattered, but Elena tracked the second, leading her shot carefully. Second down. The third vanished behind a boulder. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Then, from the comms, a warning. Multiple contacts closing. Reinforcements inbound. She was alone on the ridge. No backup. No spotter. Elena swallowed hard, tightened her grip, and scanned the horizon. More shadows emerged, fighters moving fast, closing the distance. She took a deep breath. This was no longer about survival. It was about protecting her team, her mission, and every life depending on her. Shots rang out below as the assault team engaged. Elena fired again and again, precise and unyielding. One by one, the shadows fell. Minutes later, helicopters roared overhead, announcing reinforcements. The enemy retreated. Elena lowered her rifle, sweat streaming down her face. She had held the line. Back at base, the mood was different. Quiet pride mixed with exhaustion. Brooks approached her, a rare smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. "You did good, Ramirez." "Better than good." She nodded, tired but resolute. This was her place now, no longer the mule, no longer the shadow. She was a sniper, and she would keep watching. Elena sat alone on the ridge, the last light of day fading behind the distant mountains. The rifle rested across her lap, warm from hours of use. She stared out at the valley below, the silence almost deafening after the chaos of the day. It had been a long mission, longer than any before. The enemy was growing smarter, more aggressive. But so was she. Her mind drifted back to the first time she held that sniper rifle, cold, unfamiliar, heavier than she expected. Back when she was just the ammo mule, running supplies, invisible to most of the team. She remembered Jacob's steady voice telling her to breathe, to focus, to see the world differently. Those lessons had saved lives. Now, the rifle was an extension of herself, a tool and a promise. She was more than the support. She was the line between safety and danger. Her radio crackled softly. Ramirez, come in. Mission complete. Extraction team inbound. She nodded to herself. Time to leave the perch. Time to go back. But something pulled at her. A feeling she couldn't shake. A tension beneath the surface. She scanned the ridge one last time. Movement. Not far. Too close. Too deliberate. She didn't hesitate. Her finger found the trigger instantly. The figure froze, then dropped. The extraction helicopter landed moments later, dust swirling around it like a storm. Her team rushed toward her, faces tired but relieved. Brooks approached, eyes sharp. "You saved us out there," he said quietly. "You saved me." Elena looked away, feeling the weight of those words. She wasn't a hero. Not yet. Just someone who had learned to step up when it mattered. Back at base, the debriefing was thorough. Every detail dissected. Every decision analyzed. Elena answered questions, never once boasting, never once shrinking. She knew this was just the beginning. Her place was on the ridge, watching, waiting. Because in this world, the shadows never disappeared. And neither would she. As night fell, she cleaned her rifle under the soft glow of a lamp, her hand steady, her mind calm. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new dangers. But for now, she was ready. Ready to protect. Ready to fight. Ready to be the sniper she was meant to be.